Hello everyone, welcome to the channel Anthropohistory and Colonialism. I am Victor Collins, anthropologist, and today we are gonna focus on a lecture based on the already settled um, maritime imperial formation or fleet under the Spanish crown, okay, known as Columbus fleet, as he was actually called Almirante Colón, okay, and also we're gonna reference the the Tudor dynasty of Queen Elizabeth that worked aside John Dee and Edward Kelly. Of course, we know there were rivalries and even war situations between these monarchies, but deeply they are interrelated matters that we are gonna try to examine now. Okay? Well, so, excuse me. So, pointing out to the Tudor dynasty of Britain, um, we are gonna follow our line of thought based on a work by Michael Tessarian, which is called Origins and Oracles. Okay, and the thesis is related to the question: what was um, the true necessity behind the maritime colonial expansion, considering that by no means this is an inedited expansion or we are talking about a pioneering on the seas. Okay, nothing could be further from the truth. We already examined that maritime expansions uh, in very different nature of intentions and the modality of their work were happening since at least after the Atlantean cataclysms, okay, focusing on the Western world, okay. Now, of course, we are focusing on the colonialist modality of expansion, okay, and we may ask a few questions, like, for example, in the case of the Spanish crown of Queen Isabella and King Fernando, that had right immediately before the expansions defeated the Moors in the south of Spain in a very long war situation that took quite a while to be decided, and that was at stake the region of south of Spain, okay, and a sort of a syncretic and very powerful culture whose most famous expressions come from the cities of Granada and Alhambra, right? And others, of course. This is a very superficial resume, okay? So basically, how did such a crown that had uh, immediately after defeated the Moors in very, very intense battles, since the Moors were known for their expertise in cavalry and other means, how were they uh, so deeply impelled to form a maritime fleet and perform this expansion? Okay, so this is a question. And the other question refers to the Tudor dynasty, which was at that time uh, basically coming from a line of monarchs that were having very, very, very deep problems in territorial issues, with rebellions within other peoples, okay, including the Scots, and and were very poorly supplied with finances and riches, okay. And then we tie to the story of John Dee and Edward Kelly, which is basically, we are talking about a prodigious man, John Dee, okay, who basically owned the largest library in Britain at that time, and was residing near the Tudor dynasty facilities, okay, when a a deep necessity tied both of them together, and John Dee passed. Pardon me. John Dee started to apply his expertise and his knowledge in sciences and studies of languages and philosophy and even the occult arts to the necessities of the crown. Okay, so what Michael Tissario will say is that this Tudor dynasty set of royals, they actually descend in a genealogy way back in time from post-Atlantean descendants, okay, which suffered severe loss and damage with the cataclysms, and basically were tied directly to an event that we can define as an off-world imperialist intervention. In other words, the Tudor dynasty, and not only, many other aristocratic powers in Europe and actually all over the world, okay, and this study has been done by many competent people and anthropologists, okay. Um, so um, these descending bloodlines were facing a very troublesome situation, which is, after their long in the genealogy of generations, after their ancestors have intervened imperialistically on the earth, they also perform hybridization, okay, which is basically crossing the ET DNA with the human DNA. And this is the source of the concept of virgin queen, for example, according to Tessarian's research, okay. And also um the concept of royalty. So royal simply means those that are tied by blood, the bloodlines, descending from the off-world imperialist interventors of the past. Pardon me? Well, what happened is, after this imperialist intervention and the forced hybridization, our planet Earth suffered from uh, a process of quarantine. So it was established a frequency barrier that basically made this planet a prison, okay? And also, these off-world imperialists lost a great deal of their technology um, through the Atlantean cataclysms, okay? So this is a brief resume of what situation the Tudor dynasty of Queen Elizabeth, right, was facing. And then came John Dee as a deep occultist with a proposal solution, which follows as through what they called Enochian magic, okay, through their occult arts, they could establish direct contact with these off-world beings that were tied to the Tudor dynasty royals and monarchs, okay, and the dialogue was basically about how to provide a escape from the quarantine situation and how to build these technologies and reestablish them um, for service and use once again. Okay, so this is a basic problem that truly fits uh, and underlines the whole colonialist maritime expansion. Okay, and in the case of the Castilla and Aragon monarchy, okay, we can have also pointed out a very deep imperialistic drive to conquer as many lands and many peoples as possible, okay, and establish what I will call the demiurgic theocratic rule. Okay, so the concept of demiurge uh, derives from the Nag Hammadi library, okay, and all the gospels that were found in the 40s, if I'm not mistaken, in Egypt, Nag Hammadi, Egypt, okay, and the central idea is that uh, this material world is ruled and was fashioned by a demiurge, okay, which is basically a tyrannical deity, okay, whose main purpose is control and establishing a prison system to maintain the souls in prison, okay, and dissociated from their true origin, uh, or in other words, dissociate the monad, which is the divine spark that each human being carries, from its original source called the pleroma. Okay, so this is a very brief resume. Okay, and we can say based on historical archaeology. Okay, and I quote a very important book from Todorov, okay, about Columbus enterprise, which uh, will we will observe the Spanish crown with this sort of dual function. One is, of course, the harvesting through slave labor of minerals, especially silver and gold, which, contrary to common sense, are not about simply be put in the banks and back an economic system based on printed money. Okay, no, these metals actually have um, a esoteric use, which is basically the fabrication of advanced technology and all sorts of uses that we are not really aware because we were never told about this, okay, but parallels directly the kind of work that John Dee through the occult arts was doing while establishing dialogue with off-world beings to provide a solution so the monarchs of Britain and their allies could basically be provided by be provided of the advanced technology that they lost in the Atlantean cataclysms, okay, and consequently vacate the prison planet Earth. Okay? Well, and aside the harvesting of minerals, there was the establishment in a worldwide basis of the Christian Roman um, theocratical demiurgic system, which is a great deal of what is known as the Holy See, okay, and as the very from the very mouth uh, and words of the officials under the Holy See, spread the Christian faith around the world. Okay, so there we tie through the occult uh, two objectives based on these two very influential monarchies, which were, after all, directed from Rome and the papal system of the Holy See. Okay, this idea of converting natives to Christianity and all the kind of subversive stuff that we find through the archaeology in history. Okay, well, um, so defining a few concepts, uh, Virgin Queen simply means the closest DNA to the off-world imperials. Okay, royal means uh, the power the power offered and generated by the off-world imperials. Okay, and all the aristocracy based on bloodline choices are, including the marriages and the control over sexual liaisons and all of this, has to do, as they call the purity of blood, right? Has to do in maintaining this agenda and maintaining the source of the power. Okay, so this is a thesis, of course, and it's based on this paradigm that refers to a off-world imperialistic intervention in the earth in ancient times. Okay. Um, well, so once the naval fleet establishes its feet on the ground, okay, uh, what will proceed is that uh, the judiciary, aristocratic, and military forces will combine together, okay, under the demiurgic theocratical regime, okay, and then comes associated another serious problem, which is once the occultists like John Dee and Edward Kelly establish contact with the off-world beings through the Enochian magic, they are supposed to pay back for the services, which is basically um, the offer of ritual sacrifices. So we can quote here the expedition of Cortés through the Yucatan and what they called Veracruz in Mexico or New Spain. Okay, and in the book of Todorov, The Conquest of America, it says there that in very few decades, um simply millions and millions of natives were murdered in what I am pointing out as ritual sacrifices. Okay, so these are organized according to geomancy, okay, which is a concept that we already have explored in previous lectures, and serve as payment for the off-world imperialists that expect the payment so they can provide the knowledge and the solution for the vacation of the prison planet. Okay, and of course, once these powers that I mentioned are established, the harvesting and the harvesting through slave labor, okay, which was philosophically and theologically based and justified by some authors as a Aristotle for sure, okay, very likely Saint Jerome, okay, just as the College of Cardinals and the aristocracy used to make use of scientists such as Eratosthenes and Marin de Tyr, which are Greek and Syriacal scientists, to basically perform a certain control over the maritime fleet. Okay. Um, well, so once these powers become a complex of colonial enterprise, and all sorts of concepts and knowledge are already in place to justify the whole enterprise, including the sacrificial murder, the enslavement, the and also the royalty titles that these elites and these aristocrats carry to the new world. Okay, and that was a deep issue between Columbus, Almirante Colón, right? We must distinguish because Columbus is a Masonic name that points out to the placement, the emplacement of this man Colón within the Masonic order. Okay, so there was a deep tension and conflict between Colón and the Masonic orders. So the interests, the private interests, and the wider colonialist agenda could fit in one another. And we know that there was a lot of conflict and tension along the process. Okay? Well, so once the complex of powers under the demiurgic theocracy is established, there is this deep necessity for extracting from the earth in the most violent means the minerals, especially gold and silver, okay, and also the miseducation work led by the Jesuits, right, to do what they call the conversion to the Christian Trinity and Christian faith. Okay, so basically, um, of course, these powers will work together side by side, okay, and with no interest whatsoever in the native people, since they were considered to be savages, primitives, and people that were uh, out of the greater historical process. So basically, they were uh, uh, pointed out in a total inferior condition, okay? And the main goal was basically control of the minds, control of the souls. We know that famous Jesuit quote, which is give me a child, and when he's 7 or 9, he will be mine forever. Okay, and with the extraction of minerals, which they did succeed in the quantity of tons and tons and tons, that later they ship it all back to Spain and to Europe. They did succeed to base their production of advanced technology. Okay, right. Um, well, a key role to develop this advanced technology for the time was performed by the uh, the people that today we know, even if we were misinformed about them, as all of these great geniuses, artists and scientists, which includes for sure Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, so we all saw the sketches of technological machines and all sorts of esoteric knowledge codified in his paintings. So, of course, we were lied, we were misinformed about all the historical process, no doubt about this. Okay, and these geniuses actually were members of secret societies. So, one example, uh, Leonardo da Vinci is not necessarily the name of a man. Okay, this term, when broke down, means the great lion that wins. Okay, just as the term Colombus means the dove. So, what are these symbols and codes all about? Well, they are about the old descendancy through the royal bloodlines, way back to what I will call Atonist Egypt. Okay, so Imperial Egypt through the cult of Aton and Seth. Okay, and this is a subject that was widely explored in the great work of Jordan Maxwell, right? And basically, the idea is to continue the work of the secret societies that were born in Imperial Egypt, okay, where the term Davud in Hebraic or David in the Latinized form derives, okay, which simply means the military field commanders under the cult of the Aton. And Aton in Latin is equates exactly with the term soul. Okay? So Roman Christianity is basically the cult of Sol and Jupiter. Okay? And of course Jupiter is the demiurge, right? The demiurge is nothing new. It's a not a concept but a cult and a reality present since ancient imperial Egyptian times. Okay, in other words, the cult of Zeus is found through archaeology since at least the 14th dynasty, when the Minoans migrated to the Nile Valley, and together with the Hyksos that enter Egypt, at that time was called Cam, of course, from the Caucasus, right, in a sort of imperialistic way, and formed this and established the city of Avaris that later has become known as Zion. Okay, so the cult of Zeus, which later becomes Jupiter or the demiurge, is to be found in Imperial Egypt since the 14th dynasty, and this is the and also the cult of Seth. Okay, so this is the core of Roman Christian imperialism is Atonist Egypt. Okay, therefore these geniuses, artists, and scientists, they were all members of secret societies, and Leonardo da Vinci is simply an exaltation of the ritual of consecration of the Lion of Judah. Okay, so basically the pharaoh consecrated under Sol or Aton, which is uh, being performed since between the 14th and 18th dynasty. Therefore, we can quote their Akhenaten, we can quote the Ptolemean dynasties, we can quote um, Alexander the Great, Caesar Augustus, and finally Julius Caesar. Okay, so these secret societies, which were the background where these emperors were consecrated sons of God, in Latin Divi Filius, okay, were the same secret societies into that the Spaniards and the Spanish crown and also the British royals were linked to directly from Atonist and Scythian imperial Egypt, okay, or the Judite and Levite tribes of imperial Egypt, okay. And Leonardo da Vinci was a member of one of these secret societies, which was hired by these monarchs, okay, to develop scientific and technological machinery and also all sorts of anatomical studies and artistical and aesthetical studies to serve the agenda of these secret societies. Okay, we will not enter in the question if was this good or was this evil, because this is basically a false question. Okay, I am simply trying to offer a contextual background in how these geniuses operated linked to the secret societies and the monarchic powers of their time, which are nothing new. Okay, that can be traced way back, at least between the 14th and the 18th dynasty of Imperial Egypt. Okay, well, um, and I also want to complement when the subject is the manufacturing of tools and advanced technologies, the role of the weapons, okay, because the whole colonialist maritime enterprise, uh, which during our course we will deconstruct idea per idea, okay. For example, there was no such new world. This idea is completely debunked now, and it will be debunked in the conclusion of this lecture, okay. So the weaponry was very, very important in its role into how the aristocrats and the judicial powers and the military would perform their duty. Well, my point is, we were talking previously about hybrid bloodlines within the monarchs, okay? And below on the pyramid of power, which is vertical, okay, we have beings known as the Nephilim, okay? And the Nephilim were Nephilim is actually a wide concept which I will direct now in this specific task they performed, in the fabrication of tools and weaponry, so the colonial enterprise could happen. Okay, so basically the Nephilim in this case were experts in weapon making with the material known as steel. So they were forgers, okay, and they were very, very efficient in sword making and probably even gunfire making. Okay, so they were experts in this uh, work with liquid metal, fusing metals, fashioning metals. Okay, and in this case they were at the service of the crown. Okay, and there is a famous Nephilim in the Western Mediterranean culture known as Tubal Cain. Okay, it's just an example. Okay, and of course we're not gonna enter the whole Nephilim subject, which is very wide. I'm simply pointing out that their role was a key role within the colonial enterprise. Okay, and I suggest um very much under Jordan Maxwell's and Michael Tessarian's work that all of you, my friends, uh, put an effort in learning for those that have not learned yet, and those that have learned to deepen the work on uh, symbol um, symbol etymological and historiographical literacy, because the truth is uh, in today's world there are countless information and symbols and all sorts of encoded language suggesting Nephilim activity. For example, the most famous one is the car industry Ferrari. Okay, Ferrari means ferramentario, okay, the tools or the weapons made by the noble ones, the aria, which is not necessarily the true meaning and value of the concept of aria, which we will leave aside right now, okay, for further lectures. But basically what they are saying is that we, the noble ones, have the knowledge of tool making, of forging metals and forging all sorts of complex materials to build machines, technologies, tools, and weapons. Okay? And we know that the black horse is the symbol, the black horse in Latin means caballus, right? Is the symbol of the cabal, which is this controlling order of powers and fraternities that still rule the world through Rome under the Holy See to this day. Okay, okay. So I suggest that everyone deepen their literacy on symbols, etymologies, and historiographies, which is a very useful knowledge, as all the information is actually being given to us, okay, if we can decode it, okay. And to complete this lecture, um, pardon me, every one of you, I still have technical problems and even lecture problems, okay, on this channel. I will sophisticate and develop within time, okay? But basically the content is all accurate, okay? Pardon me for the limitations of slides. I could have brought more slides, but for now this is what we've got, okay? So to complete the lecture, what I would like to say is that Columbus or Almirante Colon, before when the whole enterprise was settled with the crown, the occult bankers, okay, which many were Jewish, proving that in matters of enterprise, belief systems are not important. Okay, so they work together, and much of the maritime fleet was financed by Jewish bankers. Okay, when all of this complex of powers were already tied one another to perform the colonial expansion, Almirante Colón went to Galway in Ireland, and this is a part of the story that was never told to anyone. And the reason is very simple. One of the big fears of the Holy See is to conceal the fact that there was a maritime expansion that we already dived into previous lectures, of a spiritual and astrological nature, okay, performed by the Arcadians or the Fenians, which translates as the sons of the little bear, the constellation of the little bear, where the star Polaris derives from. Okay, so this was one of the big fears of disclosure, and also to remain concealed by the Holy See. But nevertheless, Almirante Colón met a man called William Harris in Galway or Dublin, okay, which was basically the leading master in the fleet formed by the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, okay. Well, so we're gonna conclude with this information, with this fact. To deepen this knowledge, I quote the digital bibliography uh, called Ireland's Hidden History, or Ireland and America's Hidden History. The link is in one of the previous slides. Is an absolutely amazing documentary quoting the works of Barry Fell, okay, and other very important people, proving that all that we have been told about the New World and the discoveries and even the name America and all of this complex of made up narratives are all misinformation. So this is one of the purposes and the objectives of this channel, is to deconstruct the misinforming narratives, and while dealing with symbology, etymology, archaeology, and historiography, delve into the alternative knowledge. Okay, so thank you very much. And again, pardon me for the technical limitations. I promise that as time progresses, as the work progresses in time, I will sophisticate and correct them all so we can have more pleasant lectures. Thank you very much and see you in the next lecture. Bye bye.